Video number 2 of the Comancheria tutorial. We're basically just following along from the tutorial that is included in the playbook for the game. If you didn't watch video number 1, I recommend you do that just so you know there's some continuity there. There's some reading assignments that you really ought to do before you go further. Before you were to watch this video, you're supposed to read sections 1.3.3, 1.3.4, and 135. 136 from the rulebook. Basically, all of the rules covering cards in the game. And so hopefully you will have done that. And so part of the setup now is to take the history card H1. Remember, there's 4 history cards in the game. They're numbered H1, H2, H3, H4. For the tutorial and for the scenario 9.2, really you're just going to use card H1. All the rest of the history cards aren't going to be needed. And so we put this on the table in the space provided for it on the map with the enemy action table side of the card face up. There is a reverse side to this card. It is not displayed in Vassal because it's not used in the module. It's not necessary for the module. But in your physical game, you will notice that on the reverse side of card H1 is an abbreviated setup for the first historic period of the game. So if you're playing scenario 9.2 or any scenario that shares that particular setup, then you can actually just get started by looking at the back side of this card. It's just a way to expedite game setup. Once you've done it a few times, it becomes I don't really have to consult it. But, maybe you haven't played it nearly as many times as I have. And so we just wanted to mention that is what's going on with the reverse side of that card. All right, so here we go. We're going to find development cards numbers 1, 2, and 3. And you'll notice that they have red numbers in the lower right-hand corner. They're already pre-positioned here in Vassal, so you want to find the Apache War, Ute Alliance, and War of the Spanish Succession, and place them up here. It really doesn't matter which box they go in. I can transpose these. The order of these cards positioning doesn't impact gameplay, so don't. I realize now that that's never, I don't think, actually said in the rules. But the order in which these are positioned up here makes no difference. The key is that there can only be a maximum of 3 development cards up here in play at any time. Sometimes there will be fewer than 3, but there'll never be more than 3. And the order is it's not something that impacts gameplay. So the rest of the development cards for period 1, the card numbers 4 through 21, basically just stack them here off to the side, face down. Ordinarily, you would shuffle those. It's not necessary to do it at this time for the sake of the tutorial. We're going to kind of stack the deck as it were. Cards, I think 11, 13, and 14 are at the top. So if you wanted to shuffle them up, just take cards 11, 13, and 14, pull them aside. The tutorial will tell you when to put them, up on top, because those are the ones that are going to get drawn off the deck in the tutorial. So, next thing we'll do is take the war cards, and there's 25 of them. Ordinarily, we would shuffle those. In Vassal, the shuffle is manual, so make sure you do that in Vassal. I should mention that both of these decks, the shuffle feature is manual, and the reason why it's manual is sometimes there is instructions to stack cards in a particular way. So if I had an auto shuffle routine in the module, that would cause a problem. So there's no need to shuffle the 25 war cards. Just put them off to the side. We didn't provide a space on the map for them. The war cards were a late development in the game, and it really made the game come alive, I think. But we really didn't provide a place for it on the map. I tend to put the deck like right here and the discard pile next to it. There is a space provided for a war event which has a lingering effect, and that'll be here. But I typically will put the war cards up here, and we'll draw them as needed. So just go ahead and put them wherever is convenient. You'll want to sort the culture cards and put them in the stacks. In the module, they are positioned like so. These are not hidden. There's no randomization of these. Just make sure that level 1 of each suit is at the top and level 3 is at the bottom. And just put them near at hand. You're welcome to read all of them and you know, to take a look at what their capabilities are. Just like with Navajo Wars, you can never buy level 2 before you've bought level 1. I should also point out that Diplomacy Level 1 is not a typo. There is no effect for Diplomacy Level 1 except that it opens the door for some pretty powerful effects in levels 2 and 3. They may not look powerful right off the bat, but in gameplay those can be very, very powerful effects. So with Diplomacy Level 1, there is no initial effect. That is not a typo, and that's the rationale behind it. I don't think I actually explained that in the rules or anything, and I thought I should probably point that out because some people have thought there's typos in areas where there aren't. That's the case with that. Okay, so sort out the culture cards. We're going to take Horsemanship Level 1 off the top of its stack, put it into play. That is the culture card we are going to begin with. Is that always the best choice? No, it really is not a cut and dried thing in this game. I've started off with a number of different opening cultures. That's horsemanship is usually the one I will go with out of habit, but it's not like you have to do that one. There's been times I will start off with level 1 of spirituality, which is a favorite card of mine. The effect of that has really helped me out in games. Warfare Level 1 is another one because it adds a new action to my repertoire of available actions. Trade Level 1 gets me access to guns right out of the gate, and that can be a game changer. So it's not a cut and dried decision, but for the purposes of the tutorial, we're going to take Horsemanship Level 1. So we are ready to go ahead and go. Before we begin, I would like for you to pause the video here, read section 1.1, section 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4 in the rulebook before continuing. Okie dokie. So you've read some sections from the rule book. I think that these are kind of foundational things that you really need to know before we go a lot further. As I said in the tutorial in the playbook, that unlike Navajo Wars, in Comancheria, the player begins with the initiative. And what I mean by that is the enemy, I don't like to call it an AI because there really isn't an AI. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. It's an illusion. But our quote-unquote enemy in the game is going to be reacting to us out of the gate. It's going to be the game system is designed to react to the player, but over the course of time that will change, and subtly you'll feel the shift in initiative where now you are responding to the game and what the game is doing to you. So that's probably the biggest difference between Comancheria and Navajo Wars right out of the gate, is we have to make use of the initiative while we have it. So we begin the game and it's our turn. So what should we do? Well, when in doubt, look at the history card that's in play, and I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in all the way so that it looks big on your video screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the victory check objectives at the bottom of the history card. And what this tells us is that there's going to be a certain point in the game when we will have to make a victory check to find out whether we are going to win or if the game is going to end with our defeat. And so the case is that we must control the Upper Arkansas territory and have a rancheria in a second territory in order to win the game. So let me go ahead and zoom out and show you that right now we do not control any territory in the game. To control a territory, we have to basically be the only there cannot be an enemy piece in that territory. A territory consists of all of the round spaces that have numbers 1 through 6 that share a common color. And for those that suffer from color blindness, we did put the names of the territories inside the circle. So all the ones that say Upper Arkansas here constitute a territory. To control this territory, we will have to eliminate these 2 tribes. Then, by having a rancheria in any one of these spaces, we now control that territory. Well, to meet our victory check objective, we are going to have to control the Upper Arkansas and build a new rancheria in any other territory. I should also point out, this is very important, Palo Duro Canyon is a special space that is not a territory. It is just a special map space. So, and the reason for that is because enemies have a hard time finding you if you're in here. It's a lot like Canyon de Chelly in Navajo Wars. But that's kind of like, you can't hang out there and win the game. It's a place to find refuge, but you can't camp out there. That won't meet your victory goal. So now we kind of know what we need to do. What we're going to have to do is take some actions in order to begin meeting our victory check objective. We got to take care of those 2 tribes. We got to build that second rancheria. So looking at the sequence of play in section 3 of the rulebook, also it's on your charts. The first phase of each game turn is the war column phase. Right now there are no war columns in play. A war column, as you can find out from the glossary, is made up of either a raid instruction or a war instruction that is going to be coupled with a numeric strength counter like this. Okay, these 2 get stacked together, they get placed on the map, and that's something else a little different from Navajo Wars, is instructions can come off of here and be moved around on the map. So that would be a war column. Right now there are no war columns in play, so this phase gets skipped in its entirety. So we don't have to worry about the war column phase. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move to operation selection phase. So what I'd like for you to do now is we're going to ask you to pause here and read section 3.2 of the rulebook, which will talk a little bit about sequence of play. Read that, and then we'll continue. Okay. Similar to Navajo Wars, the player gets to choose to execute one of 4 different operations. We added a 4th operation. If you played Navajo Wars, there's only 3 different operations. Take actions, planning, passage of time. We have retained those names, but the function and the procedure of those actions is completely different in Comancheria than it was in Navajo Wars. The 4th and new operation that the player can do is called culture, and we'll get to walk through all of those in the course of this tutorial. So right now we're not in a situation that compels us to take a passage of time operation. Namely, if our operations counter up here on this track is down here, then we must do passage of time. If the passage of time counter is in any one of these 3 unnumbered spaces, we may not do passage of time voluntarily. And there's play balance reasons for those decisions there. But each time I take an operation, this counter is going to move down this track, and once it enters a numbered space, at the end of my operation, I roll a die, and if I roll less than or equal to this number, this marker goes down to here. Then I must do passage of time, and at the end of that operation, passage of time moves down. When a passage of time marker moves into here, at the end of that passage of time, I roll a die, and if I roll less than or equal to this number, I must take a victory check. And if I have not met the victory check objective, the game is over and I lose. So there you have it. One more thing I should mention right now is that there is a second way I can lose the game, and it trumps all other conditions, and that is if I have 0 culture and 0 military points, I instantly lose the game. I don't get an opportunity to recover that situation. The instant that these 2 markers are in 0, it is game over for me. So, and that constitutes a catastrophic loss. Okay, so we don't ever want that to happen. It's better to not meet this objective than to have both of these reach 0 in my book. As a designer, that's the story that's being woven out. This is the most catastrophic way to lose the game. So Well, currently, like I said, we're not in a situation that compels us to take passage of time operation, nor are we even allowed to do so. So our choice is between planning, take actions, and culture. The advantages and disadvantages to taking a culture operation or planning and take actions, that's going to become apparent later on as we work through these. I'm not going to tell you what each one does right now. We're just going to go ahead and pick one of these and work through it. Eventually, you'll see that there are advantages and disadvantages to all of these, and really there is really no wrong way to start the game. I have a typical way I tend to open up the game with, but there is no wrong way to start the game off. So we're going to go ahead and do a take actions operation. And so what I'd like for you to do here is pause the video and read section 4.1 of the rulebook, and then we'll work through a take actions procedure. Okay, if you've read section 4.1, you kind of get an idea of how bands are going to be activated, how we activate a Rancheria, and then the various bands that are in that Rancheria get to activate. But I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this, and we're going to demonstrate this because there are some things that were difficult to explain in the rulebook. But once you see it, it will make sense, and the rulebook will make sense to you. So let's walk through this. We're going to go ahead and activate Rancheria A. That's going to be our family, if you will, that we're going to activate. We have to activate at least one of the two bands that we're going to have access to. Let me actually back up a little bit. First of all, what we're going to do is we only have one Rancheria in play, so we're going to activate Rancheria A. The Paraibo of Rancheria A has a medicine rating of 2, so that means I can take 2 of our 3 bands out of the resources box and put them into the numbered boxes to the left of the Paraibo's box. Let me zoom in all the way so you can see this really well on your video screen. All right, so the higher this guy's medicine goes, the more bands he can activate. All right, that's the idea. So at the beginning of the game, we have 3 bands, but we can only activate 2 of them because of the leadership of our Paraibo at the present time. So we'll do some things to get his leadership up, but for now, we can only activate the 2 bands here. So we take 2 of the 2-string bands out of the resources box. We put them in each of these 2 spaces. You may not put a band into this box. The only thing that ever goes into these 2 boxes are success counters from the draw cup. Okay? So we have to activate at least one of these 2. Now, why would you say, why would I want to take actions and then not activate anybody? The reason for that will become apparent. When we're done activating somebody, they get marked as finished. So, and in finished bands, there are certain penalties about them. You can't do a take actions operation in order to flip everybody over to their ready side and then do nothing. You must activate one of them. And you always activate these bands from right to left. So the leftmost band here will be the last one activated. So we're going to start with this guy right here. So we're going to activate this band here. We are going to transfer this band from the medicine track to the map space that's occupied by Rancheria A's counter, namely the Upper Arkansas space number 1. We're also going to take this opportunity to equip the band with a horse. We don't have to equip them with any. They can move on foot, but you're going to find out real quick that they move a lot better with horses. So we're going to equip him with a horse. You can equip him with more than one horse. Having extra horses can give you more movement points if you spend the horse's counter. You will find that out momentarily, but you can equip them with any resource counters from in here. You can equip underneath our band. So we're going to equip him with a horse. And so we're going to stack the horse's counter underneath him to mark that he has ownership of those. He has possession of those. And then we'll transfer him over to here. And he has 5 movement points now that he can begin to spend and to do things with. But before we do anything, I'd like for you to pause the video one more time. And I'd like for you to read sections 5.1. Which you probably, I'm sorry, I think you already read 5.1. No, you read 4.1. Okay, good. For a second there, I thought I found a typo. All right, read section 5.1, which deals with player actions, and then 5.2.1 and 5.2.2. So you're going to read about movement actions that we can take, and you're going to read about hunting. And then we're going to go ahead and do those actions in just a minute. So read 5.1, 5.2.1, and 5.2.2 from the rule book. Pause the video here, and then we'll continue. Okay, so you've read those passages, and so you know a little bit about movement. Movement is real similar to Navajo Wars, except that the map is far more literal in this game than in Navajo Wars. In Navajo Wars, the map is very much abstract. The movement cost is according to the number of the space. So, and that is an expression of ruggedness of terrain. But something you need to understand about Comancheria is that the entire Navajo Wars map would fit into one of these spaces. This is a huge swath of territory here. And so this is a much more conventional point-to-point map. Another important thing to remember is that the dashed spaces do not impact player movement whatsoever. The colored line connections do not impact player movement. All of that stuff is for enemy behavior. So behavior of the enemy against the player, that's what the dashed spaces are for, and the colored spaces. Some of the lines have multiple colors, and some of the colors will change as different cards are revealed. So none of that stuff impacts player movement, so we can go ahead and not worry about that. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to go out on a hunt. And so look at the counters here. I'm going to zoom in again. Look at the counter and notice that on the right hand side of the counter there's a white number, which is a numeric expression of their movement. The bands have a strength of either 1, 2, or 3. The higher the strength, the smaller the movement rating. So we begin the game with 2 strength bands, 3 of those in our Rancheria, and they all have a movement rating of 5. So we're going to go ahead and take this band that we've activated here. It's equipped. We've equipped it with horses. We have 5 movement points to spend, and we're going to spend one of those 5 movement points to move here into Upper Arkansas number 2, where there is a bison counter. Then what we're going to do, simply moving in here does not impact the bison at all. I could continue to move through, pass by, and it would not impact the bison at all. In order to take possession of the bison, we have to do a hunt action, which is going to take up 3 movement points. So we'll spend 3 more movement points, and we will stack the bison underneath us to show that we have ownership. We have now spent 4 of 5 movement points, so for our last movement point, we will move back here to Rancheria A. We don't have to return to a Rancheria. We can stay out here. It's just that when we are not in a Rancheria, it's more difficult to activate bands that are not in a Rancheria. So that's, and that'll become apparent as we move forward. But I know you may be thinking about that. Do I have to go back to a Rancheria? The answer is no. And in fact, sometimes you're not going to want to, because that's how we're going to start a second Rancheria, is by sending some bands out. And then during passage of time, we will build a new Rancheria using that one band. So, sorry there, I had my screen flicker on me. All right, so here we go. We have returned to Rancheria A. And so once we've returned to the same space as our Rancheria, we can just transfer the counters over here. And we'll go ahead and flip him over, mark him as finished. He retains possession of those counters. You do not unstack them yet. This is actually a really important rule in the game, is that you can only unstack the counters during the operation cleanup phase. So he maintains possession of those. So if I go out and I get possession of something, I can't transfer them to another band until the end of my turn, as it were, during the operation cleanup phase. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is take our next band, and we're going to do some fun stuff with them. So what I'd like for you to do, though, is we're going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here because I think this is a good stopping point for video number 2. We've already showed a number of things in here. If you're following along, we've gotten up to about the top of page 6 in the playbook. And so we're going to go ahead and pause we're going to stop this video here. And if you want to kind of jump ahead a little bit, we're going to do a raid with the next band. So if you want to, go ahead and read section 2.9 and section 5.2.3 in the rulebook. These are crucial rules, especially rule 2.9 on doing success checks. That's really an important function in the game. So read those, and in video number 3, we're going to go ahead and do our first raid.